When Kawhi Leonard was first drafted by the San Antonio Spurs, he was not a highly touted player. He was not expected to be a superstar or even an all-star. But those within the Spurs organization, uh, um, they knew from the get-go that he had the potential to be something special. And the same goes for Bob Dandridge. Bob Dandridge was born in Richmond, Virginia, where I'm from, and he went to high school at Maggie Walker. He went to college at Norfolk State, and he was drafted in the fourth round in 1969 by the Milwaukee Bucks, the same year that the Bucks hit the lottery over the Phoenix Suns in the draft when they were able to get the rights to UCLA's Lou Alcindor, later to be known as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. All right, and Bob Dandridge had a choice at the time to either go to the ABA or he could go to the NBA, and ultimately he chose to go to the NBA. That chose to be the wise decision. Bob Dandridge. A lot of times me, I'll say it was Kareem and Oscar. But the first season, Oscar wasn't there yet. He was still with the Cincinnati Royals. And it was a combination of Lou Alcindor at the time and Bob Dandridge who helped to turn around the Milwaukee Bucks franchise. The year before, which I believe was their first year in the NBA, they only won 28 games. The year that Dandridge and Abdul-Jabbar arrived, they won 56 games, so they doubled the win production. And the next year, when they acquired Oscar Robertson, they became a super team. All right, they went on to win 66 games, which may or may not fall as the franchise record this year. Depends on what happens with the pandemic situation, whether the season resumes. We'll have to wait and see about that. But the thing that connects, in my opinion, Kawhi Leonard and Bob Dandridge is a couple of things. Number one, they both played the small forward position, but sometimes they could play the two or list as a two. They both had large hands, although Kawhi's hands are even more abnormally large than Dandridge's. Um, but the thing that connects them was their all-around game. Dandridge was known as a great offensive player, but he could also be a facilitator when need be, and he could also be a good rebounder for his position. As we all know, that applies to Kawhi Leonard. Dandridge was also known for being an exceptional defensive player. That applies to Kawhi Leonard as well. Um, Dandridge was also known for being a clutch performer and a guy that stepped up when his team needed him. And of course, that's what Kawhi, as the stakes grew higher, um, Kawhi has a tendency to perform at a higher level. Um, so those are some things that remind me of Kawhi Leonard. Dandridge, also like Kawhi Leonard, had one of the best mid-range games in the NBA at that time. I would say, in my opinion, in the 1970s, the best mid-range games were probably Bob Dandridge, Calvin Murphy, and maybe Rick Barry at that time. But it's some other guys because the mid-range was something that was very prominent at that time. So really, a lot of guys had mid-range games at that time. Not just them. But I think those guys had maybe the best, more consistent, especially Murphy. Yeah, Murphy, Barry, and Dandridge. And as we know, Kawhi Leonard is one of the few holdouts when it comes to the mid-range. He's helped to show that during the playoffs, having a mid-range game matters. Bob Dandridge, why isn't he not in the Hall of Fame? I don't know. Um, Bob Dandridge scored more points in the NBA Finals in the 1970s than any other player. Okay. Um, he's the only player in NBA history to average 20 points or more in three different NBA Finals: 1974, 1978, and 1979. Not to be in the NBA Finals. In 1971, when Oscar Robertson was still closer to his prime, during that Finals, he barely missed the average 20 points per game. He averaged 19.6 points, 10 rebounds, and 4 assists during that series. During the regular season, I think Dandridge averaged about 18 points a game that year, I believe. Um, but Dandridge, or was it 13 points? Check that out. I don't want to misspeak. But the thing about Dandridge is that, yeah, it was 18 points. The thing about Dandridge is that, and this is why I know a lot of you guys blow a gasket when I criticize Draymond Green, when other people criticize Draymond Green, right? But this is the thing. This is why This is what makes guys like Bob Dandridge and KJ so fucking special to me, man. Um, I get on Donkey for not being able to do anything on a bad team, but yet you'll have people like Stephen A. Smith, Max Kellerman, various others say that he's a Hall of Famer, right? KJ, right? Kevin Johnson on various Suns teams, right? That had guys like Jeff Hornacek and Tom Chambers and Charles Barkley and Danny Manning and Cedric Ceballos, all right, and I know I'm missing some people. Oh, and Dan Marley and Richard Dumas, right? He on teams that had guys like that. KJ was still able to average between 18 and 20 points per game. And that's set aside the playmaking that he did, the 9 to 12 assists per game that he averaged. I mean, phenomenal. Imagine if KJ was on a bad team. Imagine if he was playing with, at that time, let's say he was on the Sacramento Kings, all right? Or he was just in some situation like Allen Iverson where he had the green light to shoot the ball 25 times a night. Do you imagine what he could have done with his efficient game, his explosiveness, his athletic ability? Bob Dandridge, if he was on a bad team, right? Remember, he played on teams with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who's the all-time leading scorer, Oscar Robertson, who routinely averaged 30-point triple-doubles during his career. He played on teams with Lucius Allen, all right, Bob Boozer, guys that could put up 15 to 18 points a game. Later on, he's with the the Washington Bullets with Elvin Hayes, who could give you 20 and 12 in his sleep, led the league in scoring his rookie year. Wes Unseld, who wasn't the greatest scorer, but he still averaged double-digit figures in points for the most part, right? Then he had Phil Chenier, very unsung player with the Washington Bullets, who could average, 15 to 17, 18 points a night, right? So he's playing on teams with all these guys, but he was still able to average 18 points a game for his career. Imagine if Bob Dandridge was on a bad team. He could average 30 points per game. But yet Donkey on the worst team in the NBA this year, the worst team, and he let Eric Pascal outplay him. Donkey couldn't even give you double-digit points. Like, I don't understand how people not getting what I'm saying. He couldn't even get you on a bad team where no one is dominating the offensive play like this, right? No one really is there just to gobble. You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense at all. Anyway, I'm digressing from my point, man. Um, he was a clutch performer, Bob Dandridge, and if you ask any of his contemporaries, he was a Hall of Fame caliber player. If it wasn't for his contributions, the Milwaukee Bucks, nor neither the Milwaukee Bucks nor the Washington Bullets would have won any of those championships. And it was his dunk in the last moments of Game 7 of 1978 NBA Finals that sealed the deal for the Washington Bullets to win their first and to date only NBA championship. Um, when you think about it, the Bullets championship that year was a bit of an upset, because when you look at who was on those Sonics teams, right? You had Dennis Johnson when he was in his prime, right? You had Jack Sikma. Matter of fact, let me look at that team right quick. I know a lot of younger people like, oh man, we don't know who these guys are. Well, it's a damn shame if y'all don't, man. I'm telling you. That just goes to show you how bad a job they're doing teaching young people about the history of basketball. Because it don't make no damn sense, because when I was growing up, we knew about guys like Mike and Pettit and Dolph Shays, and we knew about the legends. We knew about them. So I don't understand why this generation doesn't know about these guys, man. It doesn't make any sense. But yeah, this team had Dennis Johnson in his prime, later to be known with the Celtics, but by that time, Dennis Johnson lost a lot of his quickness. Um, yeah, Dennis Johnson, Jack Sikma, Paul Silas, Gus Williams, Downtown Freddie Brown. Yeah. Man, I tell you, man, every team back then had a star, man. Like, I don't even want to get into that. But unfortunately, Bob Dandridge shares another thing with Kawhi Leonard. And unfortunately, that was that injuries took a toll on him pretty early in his career. By the time he was 30, injuries had started to diminish his level of play. Um, and by the time he was 33, 34 years old, he was out the NBA. It's a shame, because as late as the 1978-79 season, Bob Dandridge was an MVP candidate. You know what I'm saying? He was an MVP candidate during the 1978-79 season. And during the 1978-79 season, check some out real quick, Bob Dandridge averaged, when he was 31 years old, he averaged 20.4 points, 5.7 rebounds, and 4.7 assists on 50%, just about 50% shooting from the floor. And but after that, man, injury started taking a toll on Bob Dandridge, and he was out the league by the time he was 34 years old, with a second stint with the Milwaukee Bucks. Before his career, he averaged 18.5 points, 6.8 rebounds, 3.4 assists, and I don't count steals because they don't go his whole career. Um, yeah, it doesn't make any sense, man, why he's not in the Hall. Doesn't. All of his contemporaries are in the Hall of Fame. All of his teammates, um, but for some reason he's not. Um, I think it has to do with generational bias too. The point I'm making about a lot of younger people not knowing who these guys were and what their production was. A lot of these guys just look at numbers and they make a snap judgment based off of stats. It's the Nick Wright generation. I can't stand some of these guys, man, because they really only look at numbers and don't look deeper into things. But Bob Dandridge was a two-time NBA champion. Four times he was an NBA All-Star. He was on the 1978-79 All-NBA second team, the 1978-79 NBA All-Defensive first team, which is why I was saying numbers aren't everything from the offensive standpoint. NBA All-Rookie First Team 1969-1970. His number 10 is retired by the Milwaukee Bucks. And his number 12 retired by Norfolk State, the college that he played for. And, yeah, Bob Dandridge is a guy who should have been in the Hall of Fame, man. He's been eligible to be in the Hall since 1987. And, yeah, it just doesn't make any sense, man. When you look at Bob Dandridge, despite the fact that he played with Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Oscar Robertson, Bob Boozer, Lucius Allen, Wes Unseld, Elvin Hayes, Phil Chenier, right? Despite the fact he played with guys like that, he still accumulated 80.3 win shares. And he accumulated 33 total defensive win shares. So, at the end of the day, Bob Dandridge should be a Hall of Famer in my opinion, man. But tell me what you guys think.